All right, hello. Is my microphone actually working? About the third time I've streamed anything apart from like VT League draws, so this has been a little bit of a last second setup. I also chose to keep up with Scully's choice of To Who music for at least for the start of it, so this is gonna be Disc C of the Alice's Emotion album Red. But yeah, I'm just gonna get right into it. I'm gonna reload my starter file in Blender so that we have a completely fresh scene so that there's no way I could have hidden anything in here. And this is what we're gonna be starting from. So, like I said, the kind of end goal of this entire thing is going to be having a completely ready, full functional character done, including the rigging. And at the end of it, I know that this is how I kind of figured this in my head was going to be that this is going to be the next logical step forward from when everyone's gone through the entire tree of pest tutorials of here's how you port head models and here's how you do full body models and so on. And then once you've kind of gone through all of that, you'll get to this point and maybe want to learn how to make custom head models and in the end make completely custom full body models. So even though it's not going to be 100% pest focus, I'm still going to keep in mind that most people are going to be using this for pest purposes. But if this ends up going all the way, this entire series, then at the end I want to do a little bit of cool stuff like inverse kinematics for if anyone ever wants to get into like character modeling for maybe not PES, maybe for like MMD projects and so on, or if just someone wants to get into character animation, that kind of stuff. And then the other thing, other neat thing that is completely useless for PES, aside from maybe making funny like facial expressions that you want to use for your players, is I kind of want to give a crash course on shape keys as well, because that's something we can't use in PES, so most people only ever see shape keys in pre-existing models that they load into Blender and then want to port into PES. So our interactions with shape keys are going to be mostly just, okay, I'm deleting all of those because they're not needed. And also, just as a warning, I think these weekend sessions, if they're going to be starting at this time, are probably going to be cutting into the cup a little bit. Like, I'll try to avoid that as much as possible, but we'll see about that one. It depends on what kind of a spot. If there's a clean kind of ending position that we get into before cup starts, then I might end it there. But expect that there's going to be a little bit of a clash, and that's just the unfortunate side effect of kind of needing to balance this between I want to start decently early, but I also don't want to start too early because it's like even on the East Coast, it's going to be like 10 in the morning at the moment. So the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to press N and turn on my screencast key so you can see that I pressed N. I'm most likely going to be working in the same window for the entire duration, so that should stay enabled for the entire series, hopefully. If I ever forget that, just remind me. It's going to be kind of important. Like, I don't intend this to be any kind of a beginner's crash course to Blender. I'm gonna expect that people have some experience like porting models and so on. But it's just need to have this in here because there's gonna be some keystrokes that are really not used at all in porting or weight painting for just our purposes for porting the models into PES. So I want to have that in there just in just for that. I'm gonna make my actual 3D viewport a lot bigger because we're not going to be needing the sidebars until we're starting to worry about setting up materials, switching to cycles, and eventually texturing our model. So the very first step, aside from turning on screencast keys, is I'm going to set up my background images so that I can have a reference sheet. I'm going to toggle that on. I'm going to go and add an image. and it'll pop up over here. I'm going to open the image and find my reference sheet here. Nothing's happened yet, but if I turn my camera with the numpad, as you can see, to any kind of orientation, I've got my reference sheet here. I'm going to be setting this up first. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the reference sheets and so on. I'd recommend for anyone doing their first completely custom model from scratch is try and find at least a decent reference sheet. Like, you can do this if you have, let's say you want to make an anime character. If you find a screenshot from a frontal angle, kind of like we've got here, it doesn't have to be 100% frontal, but the more frontal you can get it, the better it's going to be, because we're going to be tracing the shape of the head and the face from the reference sheet. And then if you can find a side angle like this, that's going to make things that much easier, because when you're first starting on modeling stuff like this, you're likely going to have a little bit of trouble with like just the shapes and the kind of general physique of a human head, and just the general physique and shape of a human body as well, the anatomy. You'll get better at that as you work on several models, but I'm still at the point where it's like I can work with reference sheets that are just a frontal thing, or even characters that don't have reference sheets, but I will grumble about it for the entire duration I'm working on them. So the ideal, this is, from what I can tell, having not done any work on this character yet, this is a pretty ideal ref sheet where we've got one frontal, we've got a second frontal for the upper layer of clothing, and that's going to be really nice, because with this, you can't really see the shape of the body over here, but thanks to this, where the entire jacket's been taken off, you can really see the curves and where you should be tracing for the upper body. And then you've got a really good side as well, where the arms are not obstructing anything. You've got, once again, the shapes of the body that you can trace. You've got the side of the head, so that you can kind of tell where the mouth is going to be, how angular the face is going to be, all of that stuff. And the back references I don't use that often. They add a little bit of uncertainty. They never line up properly, and we'll get to that in a bit. But it's still nice to have them. Like, without the back reference, for example, I wouldn't know that there's this kind of a wing decal at the back of the jacket. That's going to be important when we're texturing later on. Now, what I want to do is, first of all, I only want this to be visible from the front. This is going to be our front reference. And I'm going to be moving it so that it is centered. I think for my frontal reference, I want to use the leftmost one, because I want to use it for as much of the modeling process as possible. It would be nice to have the legs as well, though. I'm going to stick with the middle one. I want the legs. I want to trace the legs as well. I'd use this left one otherwise, because, again, you can see the curvature of the upper body better. But I'm going to have this be my main frontal reference, and I'm going to set that one up as a secondary frontal reference. So I'm going to zoom in and try and get the face, get our visible z-axis here, the blue line, have it be in the middle of the face, which it is perfectly already. That barely ever happens. You need to really tweak this, and I have a feeling that we're going to really need to tweak that for all of the other angles. But with this, I'm fine. It's middle of the chin, it's middle of the nose, really, and just, we can easily mirror the face around the z-axis now. So I'm happy with that. I'm going to, like, collapse the menu there. I'm going to add another image, have it be from the right side. I'm going to open our existing reference sheet again. Another thing I forgot to mention is that if you look at the file name, I'm going to expand that a little bit. Look at the file name, it's been upscaled by Waifu2x. One major gripe, which is going to be a running theme of this entire series, is I'm glad that this character has a reference sheet, but I also hate reference sheet artists for the things they do. Like, this was originally 1920 by a little bit over 1080, which kind of would have been fine. That's not the tiniest resolution possible. But I just went ahead and upscaled it so that I can zoom in and still get a decent resolution on the lines and everything I need to see. So I'd recommend doing that as well. Like, have your reference sheet be the highest possible resolution so that you can really zoom in there. So I'm going to have this on the right side, and if I now press numpad 3, you can see that we have a different reference here. That's my front view, and this is going to be my side view, which I'm going to be mapping to this here. So our z-axis is over here in the middle. I'm going to move my reference on the x-axis. And kind of the same deal, I'm going to want to hit about the neck and the middle of the head from the middle. The side axis doesn't matter as much. We're not going to be mirroring anything on this side. But I still kind of want it to be about the middle of the neck and the head. So I'm going to tweak this a little bit. And it's going to be about there. Yeah. So this by default goes in increments of 0.1. So I've just added, I had to manually go in and type the extra 0.04 in there. Now, before I move on, I do want to add a back reference and then my secondary frontal reference. But before I do that, here's something I haven't done before, and I'm just kind of trialing. This should be something I do every time, but I just forget every time. I'm going to add a plane. Press tab to go to edit mode. I'm going to delete everything in that plane. And then with control right click, I'm going to poke in some vertices here to act as guidelines for where my reference is going to be. I'm going to highlight the nose with a vert. I'm going to highlight the mouth. I'm going to highlight the chin without the mouth selected. And now we've got our 3 individual dots representing where these pieces of geometry are going to be. But then if I go to my side reference and drag them to where they should about be, you can see that this is our nose, but if I move it to the correct spot on the y-axis, you can see that it's far too down. So, and if I move the chin to the right spot on the y-axis as well, it's way too up. So what I want to do here is I want to go to my, make that a little bit smaller again. Go to my right side reference and fiddle with the y-axis as well. So 0.01 is once again way too much. So I'm going to set that to be negative 0.0, let's say 2. That's better. I don't like the fact that the mouth doesn't align. I'm going to try like 0.25. Yeah, the problem right now is that if I click and drag on the slider, it's not accurate enough. Oh, shift. Oh yeah, that's nice. It's much better. So this is about where I want this to be. Where the nose is just never going to align. And the mouth is just never going to align, but at least the chin is like, it's better than what it was at the start. And now our frontal reference and our side reference kind of align with each other. And this is going to be, once again, a long list of grievances with character artists, but it's like basic things like this where you'd think that from the front and the side, the nose and the chin and things like that would line up, but most of the time they don't. So we kind of have to go in and put the extra effort in to have our lineups actually work. But I'm happy with this, so I've got my front and side now. I'm going to collapse our side reference, add another one, and make this one be the back. And just open the same image again. And line up our... I'm not in the back view. Line up our z-axis with the back view, just about there. That lines up really good again. So it doesn't hit this spike of hair perfectly, but I'm just fine with that. The only thing I can foresee myself using this back reference for is to get this, like, spikiness and separation of the back hair correct whenever it's time for that. But I just like setting it up just in case, and maybe it'll be useful for the shoulders as well. And then the final thing I'm going to do, I'm going to hide our existing frontal reference and just add another one. Once again, same image. And I'm going to map this to this one so that I can use this image for sculpting the body and then for the top that's underneath the jacket. So move our z-axis. Well, rather move our reference to our z-axis again. That doesn't line up that well. Need a little bit of tweaking. Little bit more tweaking. That's about fine. I'd like this to be as close as possible to my original frontal as well, in case I need to work on the face from this side as well, but I don't think I will need to. So I'm happy with that. I'm going to collapse that, hide that, and switch back to this one, because this is going to be our main frontal reference. I'm going to... I think I'm going to keep our lineup dots around for a bit still. The one other thing I want to do here, I'm going to collapse the background images for now. The one other thing I want to do here is I want to enable matcap, and this is going to be interesting. I'm going to try and open up another Blender instance and see if OBS is able to pick that one up. I had some issues with this before. Nope. So, okay, what I'm going to do, I do want to show this off. I do want to show why I prefer using matcap. I'm going to save this one over here. Just going to call it O1 setup. Reload a startup file and open a recent file here. So this is another project I've been working on, and this is what I'm going to be working on when I'm like not live and can't be working on the current one. So if I switch to solid view, now it's double Z, I'm going to enable keystrokes here as well. This is what the model looks like in solid mode with matcap on, and this is what the model looks like with solid view with matcap off. And you can immediately see that I imagine everyone would prefer working with matcap on. It's not as reflective, and it's a nicer representation of the material. This is just so much nicer to work with. So that's why I turned matcap on. So back to our working setup. We are just about done with everything that needs setting up, and we're ready to start modeling. So there's two ways to start this, and I forgot one last disclaimer, is that if anyone is looking to learn this kind of modeling and doesn't want to sit through like several hour-long live streams in what's going to be a multi-live stream series, is the way I learned back in the day was if you go on YouTube and search for Daniel Kreuter, that's Kreuter, Kreuter. He has several tutorials for Blender 2.7, which is what I used. Specifically, the 2014 modeling, anime character modeling tutorial number 2. Yeah, I'll drop the link later when I can. I've posted it in the VGL server several times when this has been brought up as well. And he also has tutorials for newer versions of Blender. He recently did one for Blender 3 Plus. So if you want to learn right now instead of following along and like having the benefit of asking questions and hopefully getting them answered, then that's what I would recommend. And a bunch of the stuff I'm going to do is going to be lifted directly from there, but then a bunch of the stuff I'm going to do is also going to be like evolved from what I learned back in the day. And I'm sure that for the people who eventually start working on their own models and so on, you'll also go on to find out that, oh, I've Googled this thing on how to do this, or I've just kind of figured this out on my own, and this is just so much better than what I learned back in the day. And that's going to happen a lot. There's, like, just like we saw recently, like just a couple minutes ago, I had no idea that you could fine tune the slider adjustments with shift or control. No idea. I've always been typing in the minor adjustments by hand. But now we're ready to go, and there's two ways that you could start with this. Either with the head or with the body. And in Daniel's tutorials, he starts with the body, but because this is kind of tangentially related to Pez, I'm going to start with the head. Because most of the time you're going to find yourself in a scenario where the head model is going to be more important than the body model, because as long as you've got a head, you can just put that on a default kitted female body, and that's going to be fine for your purposes, especially if you're working on a crunch. You need to be done in a set amount of time. So if I were working without any kind of deadlines and just working on a model project myself, my screencast key's turned off, I'd probably start with the body, because that's honestly easier to start with. But I'm going to be starting with the face, so that we kind of have the head model tutorial portion of this out of the way first. I'm going to delete my guidelines, start completely from scratch. I'm going to add new mesh, a plane. I'm going to delete all the vertices of that plane. I'm going to control right click, poke in a vert on the right side, and I'm going to go to my modifiers tab. I'm going to add a mirror with clipping on. So clipping means that if I do this, or rather this, those two vertices that I extracted are going to be merged together. That's now one vert over here at the z-axis, which is our mirror point. As we can, well, x-axis here, but still. And then this, what I clicked here, as you can see, adjust edit cage to modify result, and that's not as important for mirror. It just, when you toggle this on, your mirrored side also appears in edit mode, and that's down to personal preference. I like being able to see the mirrored side of the model I'm working on, and some people don't. So I'm going to turn this on. It's down to personal preference. It doesn't do anything important, like it's not a life or death situation. And then I'm going to add our bread and butter modifier here, subdivision surface. Enable the edit view as well. And this is a little bit more important. Like, even if I don't have this on, the mirror display, I would like to have the subsurf display on, because we're going to be working a lot with subsurf, and I want to see how the model behaves in edit mode. I'm going to set the view subdivisions to be 2, and this is also just personal preference. I like the model being smoother. Like, subsurf, especially later on, probably about the time we're starting with hair, you'll see that a double subsurf is going to balloon our vert count and triangle count in size. But that's not a problem because it's a modifier. And once we're done with the model and we've gotten it to a point that we like, we can then just go back and set this to 1. And the extra detail will be erased non-destructively. So I like having this set to 2, now that it's not final yet and I can still go backwards, and it just makes the model look nicer, and it's going to be nicer to work with and kind of bend into the shape that we want. So I'm going to trace the outline of the face from the frontal angle first. Just extruding bits. There's no set length I'm going for, just kind of working based on feeling. There's no right answer to how spaced out your vertices here should be. None at all. It's just personal preference, whatever you feel is best. And over here, I'm just kind of going, I'm guessing, like, this is about where the face would be. You can see the ears poking out a little bit so that you can tell that this vert shouldn't be here, for example, but rather about here. I could use the mirrored side of the face as well. I'm actually going to do that. enable proportional editing and just kind of follow along that way. It would have been easier, like you can see the face more clear over here on the left side. It probably would have been easier to have my mirror be on the left side so that the part of the mesh I'm working on would be on the left, and then the part that it's mirrored would be on the right. But I just prefer working on the right. I'm going to pull that over a little bit. Like, this doesn't match perfectly over here anymore, but that's fine. And then I'm going to switch to our side. Make sure that I grab the chin here and just pull it towards where the chin would be. Now, as we learned from our setting up the background images and our lineup helper and all of that, is the chin is never going to line up on both sides. Like over here, I can pull it down a little bit. But here, it's not exactly where it needs to be. It's close enough, but not exactly where I would want it to be. But that's just something we're going to live with, where we understand that only one of these references is going to be 100% correct, and the other one's going to be an approximation. We're just going to have to deal with that. So then these verts over here are going to form our cheek, basically. So I'm kind of going to drag them into a nice and smooth line over here, with our top of the head being about here. You can see that this is where all the hair starts from. So that's about where the top of the skull is going to be. It doesn't line up exactly over here. The top of the skull is going to be a little bit above where the top of the head is in our mesh right now. But that's just another thing that we're going to account for and keep in mind when working. I don't think the hair is going to be puffy enough where all of this is just hair and no skull underneath. So I'm happy with this curvature. Kinda, I'm going to have it curve a little bit more. That's something we can just tweak as we've actually made our head mesh. This is just the kind of outlining process. That's going to make it easier for us to actually make the mesh itself. I'm going to select the chin again over here. And I'm going to start moving upwards. So our mouth is about here. So I want to leave a vert there. And then I want to leave a vert just underneath the nose, at the tip of the nose, and then just along the bridge of the nose. And then just follow the outline for the rest of it. And again, it's just kind of no set rule on the amount of vertices you're going to be placing. It's just one of those where it's going to be easy enough to dissolve or place more vertices later on. So there's no need to worry about, oh, have I placed too many verts or have I not placed enough verts at this point? As long as you have a clear kind of outline of where the face is going to be. So now we've kind of put a face mask over here. But I want to extend it to cover the entire head. So I'm going to, once again, select our chin and start working on the rest of the head. I want to say the neck is going to be about here. I'm going to shift D that vert over here and start working on the back of the head. And this is one of those parts where the amount of vertices that you place is going to matter. Because I've got, my neck basically starts here. I've got one vert in the middle and one at the bottom. So I want to match down the other side of the neck for future when we're going to be actually modeling out the neck itself. So I'm going to have 3 vertices over here as well. And then we can't see it from any angle. So this is, again, going to be just guesswork and just kind of understanding of anatomy. So I'm going to try and follow along this skull here. That should be higher. These could be a little bit further back. And I'm fairly happy with that. So for the final thing, I'm going to be connecting these two parts with F. I'm going to add a vert in the middle. I'm going to disable our clipping on our mirror for a bit. And I'm going to just grab that middle vert so that we kind of have the width of our neck as well. This should be way further up here, and this should be here. And as a result, these need to adapt to the curvature. So now we've got kind of a rough guideline of where our entire head structure is going to be. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to start kind of filling out this structure with faces. I'm going to widen that a little bit. Just kind of tweaking things. This is another part where having had my... If I had my actual working area on the left side of the face rather than the right, would have been nicer, because you can see almost the entire eye on the left, but I'm just going to live with this. So again, with Control right-click, I'm going to poke in a vert, and we're going to be tracing our eye sockets. And this is going to be another just nice little point of guidance for when we're going to start constructing the face. So I'm going to roughly trace where the eye would be. We can cheat a little bit and look at the left over here. And connect those. Make sure that's 8 verts. It doesn't have to be exactly 8, but it would be nice if this were a number that's divisible by 2. Because for other tools that we're going to be using at several points in this tutorial, like grid fill and so on, I want to say even bridge edge loops, having an even number of vertices is very important. So whenever I remember, for stuff like the eyes, eye sockets, so on, I like working with, if not powers of 2, then at least divisible by 2 numbers. Those two are a little bit too close. And then I'm going to refer over here. The issue with this model right now is that she is squinting a little bit. So this is going to be another repeating thing in the series. But in situations like this, just refer to yourself. Like you're going to be a good reference for stuff relating to anatomy, for example. So these here are supposed to be the eyelashes. So this here underneath the eyelashes is supposed to be the eyelid. So we're kind of going to want to match where the eyelashes / eyelids start for our eye sockets. So this is looking good enough. And it matches the curvature. I'm going to hide everything for a little bit and see that, yeah, that white bit there is going to be part of the eye socket, so this needs to be a little bit wider. And I don't want to poke in another vert, because that would ruin the 8, so I'm just going to adjust things a little bit here along the lower eyelid. I think I'm happy with that for the general shape of the sockets. I'm going to go to my side reference, and you can see this is completely misplaced, because we're working directly from a frontal angle. So I'm going to drag it to where our eyes would be. Same issue we had before. The frontal position of the eye does not match the side position. But I'm just going to make the decision that the frontal reference is going to be better for our eye. So I'm going to ignore the fact that from the side we are floating a little bit. I'm going to grab the corners over here, because you can see that the eye has a natural curvature towards the side of the head. And just grab these with the proportional editing and pull them to where the eye would about be. Another thing I hate about character sheets, even though they're really useful for tracing and giving you an idea of what the character looks, is like, could you have at least kept the eyes consistent between the angles? The side has a much higher degree of squint, so this is basically unusable from the side, other than knowing that, yeah, we're going to want the other corner, the outer corner of the eye to be about here. And that'll be fine. So you can see from a 3D view that it looks a little bit more natural now compared to when it was completely flat. So I'm going to select the entirety. Did that? Okay, that doesn't show up. That's unfortunate. You can select an entire loop of vertices like this if you hold Alt and click, instead of just having to go through all of them one by one holding Shift. Just Alt click, and that'll select the entire loop, and we're going to be using that one a lot as well. I'm going to turn off my proportional editing, extrude, scale down a little bit, and we're going to be forming our eye sockets here. Now that I've pulled it back a little bit, I can scale it up, extrude again, close it in, and then space and grid fill. And we'll get a nice fill over here. What you could do as well is you could solve this yourself. Like, for example, selecting these two and just filling like that. But most times, grid fill is just going to be nice and easy and doesn't take as long. And is going to be able to solve more difficult problems as well. Like, let's say that we had 16, 24, 32 vertices in a loop there. Grid fill would have been able to give you an acceptable solution that you would have yourself spent several minutes trying to work out, just manually filling. So I'm going to Control N to... I don't think that's done anything. Yeah, if I turn backface culling on, you can see that these are facing the wrong way. I'm going to select the entire eye socket and Control Shift then, and now they're facing the right way. I'm also going to smooth, and I'm not 100% sure about the shape of the eye socket, but we're going to find out if that works fine when we eventually make the eyes themselves. So from here, we're going to start working on actually modeling out the face. I'm going to extrude again from the eye sockets and scale up this time. Turn on proportional editing again. And just kind of try and find places to fill. So this is usually a good start of extruding from your eye sockets and then filling to our the middle of the face, our kind of mirror axis. And then from here, it's kind of just personal preference which direction you want to start going. Like, you could go up here, fill the easier, less important part of the head first to get some practice in filling out areas. I personally like going over here. I need another vert over there. Fill those in. Fill these in. I'm going to start with the top of the head, so I'm going to go up here and just kind of work quickly. Because like I said, I'm treating this as kind of a PES model kind of a thing. I'm not going to care too much about topology. I really don't care about topology in general. Like, these are not professional models. And I doubt this model will be actually used for anything outside of, like, personal projects and so on. So topo doesn't matter. I'm just kind of finding out solutions to how to fill these areas. So these kinds of intersection points are also going to be tricky, where you're coming up to the connection point in the middle of the head. When you're coming from the kind of forehead side and when you're coming from the back of the head side, you're going to have to get a little bit creative here. So I'm going to enable clipping again. I'm going to pull these closer. I'm going to say that I want those to be connected. And I'm going to fill in this part. Those were facing the wrong direction. You could tell from the darker color. And then I'm going to say that I want to fill this hole. So this is 7 vertices. I want it to be 8. And then it's just a matter of figuring out. I guess I'm going to connect these two. Nope. I'm going to connect these. And no clear solution here either. I'm going to undo that. And this is just kind of trial and error. I think I am going to connect these. Have it be like that. And that. And that works out fine. We're going to deal with the weird shape of the head later, when we've, like, actually filled out the entire rest of the face and probably the rest of the back of the head. But this works out fine. Like, this kind of topology is not going to be an issue. Like, it's not the nicest thing, but then at the same time, if you think about it, what in here is going to be moving in a way where topology would be important? All of this is going to be painted to the head anyway. Like, no matter what kind of model you're working on, whether it's MMD or meant for PES only or stuff like that. So, this kind of topo is just, it doesn't matter. So with that, I'm going to move to the more difficult part of the facial construction. And I'm going to start with the mouth. Because just like with the eye sockets, with the mouth, we're going to have a nice little starting point to work with. Now, this is going to be the worst part of our little reference sheet discrepancy. I have to move the mouth up here. I can't follow the side reference for this too much. I need to know the shape of the mouth and the width and so on from the front. So I'm going to take these three vertices with the intention of this being our upper lip, and this being our lower lip, and this being like the middle of our mouth. And again, with clipping turned off, I'm going to extrude and immediately re-enable clipping. And I'm going to extrude another time. We're going to kind of have the shape of our mouth over here. It's going to be a little bit oversized, but that's fine. I'm going to select the middle part, press V to rip it open, bring these two inner vertices in a little bit and fill that. And we have a very rudimentary mouth. Now, it's got this little bit of a shiny thing going on here as well, which tells me that the normals are facing the wrong way, and it needs to be smoothed as well. And then if I now enable backface culling, you can see that it doesn't disappear. So it's facing to the front again. So now I'm going to select the inner loop of the mouth, and without proportional editing, extrude again. And kind of pull it back in towards the actual mouth cavity. And there's a couple ways to do this. I think I'm going to keep on referring back to Daniel's tutorial, in case someone has watched that or is trying to watch that. What he does is he selects the upper or the lower part of the loop, like this, and takes it up like this, then inverts it again, and then balloons it out into an actual mouth cavity. What I want to do is I don't want to do that like flip-flop maneuver. I just want to have an actual mouth cavity. So scale it up like this. Extrude again, scale it up again. Select that loop and look at it from the side. Scale Y0, and that's going to make sure that all of the vertices are in the same spot on the Y-axis. And then from here, I'm going to close it. And that's still not ideal. Like, that is way too shallow, for example, for a mouth. But for now, that's going to be fine. And we're going to worry about the shallowness and all of that much, much later on. We're going to be adding, I think, at least that we're going to be adding a tongue and teeth into this. I'm not 100% sure yet, because those would not be usable most of the time in PES. Like, you wouldn't want any kind of extra action going on in there. But I think if I'm going to be doing like inverse kinematics and shape keys and so on, then for the sake of completeness, I think having just a tongue and teeth would be nice as well. Definitely don't want to be widening that. I'm going to make this a little bit more narrow. And then this still looks very stupid, but we're going to fix that once we're done filling in the rest of the face. So I'm going to hide our mouth for now. We're fine with the cavity itself. I'm going to select the outer loop here and extrude, scale, grab Y, That's not okay. Something's gone wrong there. I'm gonna disable clipping for this for a while. And I'm gonna have to move these manually. Yeah. That'll be better. And then I can re-enable clipping and have these clip up here. Oh, there's still something wrong there. I'm gonna disable my mirror modifier and subsurf and see what's actually going on over here. Okay, that is detached for some reason. So I'm just going to leave it be detached and add inverts over here and merge it in like this. And now we kind of have a natural extension from our lips, and we can start kind of working our way towards the rest of the face here. So that's our terrible nose structure. And it'll look very stupid at this point, but we're going to get to fixing it once we're done actually making the geometry, and it'll look a lot better. So from here, we're once again kind of just figuring out nice ways to fill in these gaps that we've left. So there's our easy solutions. We've got our nose kind of area connected, and we can connect this part to our chin. We're going to need another vert over there. So I don't want to extrude. I want to just connect like this. And this is going to connect, eventually I want to say about here. I might need to add another loop here, but I'm going to try this solution first. So do it like that. And then, let's say, this connects here. You have a massive face over there. Move this around. Move this around. I can already kind of tell that's not going to work, so I'm going to undo that. Ideally, I wouldn't want to add any loop cuts that would do something to the eye sockets. So I'm going to try and solve this way. So we would have our big face over there. Connect this, kind of like this. We'd have these and these. Again, this is terrible, horrible topology. But it'll be fine. Have these be connected, maybe? That's 5. We need a loop somewhere. Over there. And yeah, okay. Now we've kind of filled that in. Not ideal. But it'll do. So now... Oh, another thing I'm so used to that I forgot to mention. This is something that comes up in Daniel's tutorial. You can see, luckily here, that the last operation I did was smooth vertex. I've bound that to the hotkey Q. This is one of the most useful non-modifier tools that we're going to be using. Because you can see stuff like, these lips don't look natural. Or like, this bump over here does not look natural. I'm going to select all of that geometry, and then press Q a couple times. And you can see that Blender is smoothing it out. So you can see from solid view that we've got this terrible bump over here. Well, Q didn't help much with that. What we're rather going to have to do is, with proportional editing enabled, we're going to just have to pull the corners of the mouth back like this. And smooth that out instead. And smooth this. And just very liberally apply smoothing. Probably not to the edges, because this would ruin our model's alignment with the reference. But for any geometry that's actually filled in, just keep on smoothing. So that looks significantly better already. But I want to do something for the lips here. I'm going to add another loop there. And then now with that loop, we can add a little bit of volume. to our lips. And from the side view, we can kind of pull the nose up here. Now our lips should be further up here, maybe. Our chin should be further up here. Still not completely happy with that. A little bit more volume to the lower lip, and that looks a lot better already. I want to pinch the corners of the mouth shut a little bit, so I'm going to scale along Z. Then from the front, I'm going to kind of make sure that we are not anywhere near wide enough. The corners of the mouth should be about here. So I'm going to select them. I'm going to select that as well. I'm just going to stretch. Doesn't look very good at the moment, but if we go here and just apply a smooth, it's a little bit better. Going to move these bits a little bit further inwards, and that'll alleviate it a little bit. Smooth. Bit better again. Move these parts further down, and these parts further up. And these parts further down as well. Slightly better. Just kind of trying things. Seeing if smoothing... Okay, that's a decent smooth. I don't want that to be as sunken in. Still not kind of happy with how far these extrude, so I'm going to pull these back a little bit further. Going to alleviate a little bit. Smooth those out so that we don't have the dent here. And this is going to be probably one of the more time-consuming things in modeling. Like, it's going to be, when we move on to hair and so on, it's going to be easy enough to get the, like, outline of, like, clumps of hair. But you're going to be spending a lot of time in figuring out, like, how do I smooth this out? How do I make this look a little bit more natural? I'm going to want to bring this in a little bit closer as well. Okay, that's a bit better again. Pull that up, and pull the corners of the mouth up a little bit so that we've got a little bit of a smile. Okay, that's better. I'm going to make sure from the side that we still match the reference, where we can match the reference. The mouth is never going to, like, be positioned correctly, but this is good enough. Still not 100% happy with the expression. Like, do something here maybe. Add some more volume. This is a little bit too flat, so I want to, like, bring that down. Yeah, something along those lines. It's going to look a lot better later on, once we get to texturing in a long, long time. But for now, I'm happy with the shape, and I think this is going to be, like, good enough when we're eventually going to be working with, like, shape keys for opening the mouth and so on. These verts here that I can barely see, you're going to have to go to wireframe. I want to pull them in a little bit so that we have a little bit of volume around the corners of the mouth as well. Yeah, and that's fine. So now I'm going to move into fixing the ridge over here. You can clearly tell that from several angles there's a massive ridge, but if we look at the reference from the side, you can see that that's supposed to be there. So instead of going in like this and hitting smooth a couple of times and making it look better, but making it also not match the side reference as well. What we actually need to do is go in from the side and just inflate the skull a little bit. So proportional editing is going to be your friend here. And just try to hit it from as many angles as possible. This has to be puffed out. That can be smoothed. And if you see anything like, for example, here that I smoothed out, where we've got this vert kind of looks unnatural. It's like causing a bend over here. It's a little bit closer to this than it's this. So just one smooth and it'll be placed in a more natural position. Because in modeling like this, smoothness is going to be the number one thing we're going to be looking for. Like the human, and especially like stylized anime human bodies are going to be very smooth. Kind of also try to keep in mind that you've got a side reference, like a frontal reference for the side of the head. That can be useful. So I know, for example, that there's room over here to expand to the side as well. From the top angle, we can do a little bit here to help out. But it's a lot better already than what we started with. There's a ridge forming here, so I want to smooth that entire thing. The middle ridge is nowhere near as bad right now as it was at the start. And again, try as many angles as possible. So I think I want to buff this out a little bit as well. Even though that's kind of part of the eye socket and where the eye lids and lashes would be starting, it's completely fine having it flow with the rest of the skull. And again, just look at anime topology, use yourself as a reference. For example, it took me a while for a bunch of models when I was starting. My mouth for the model would look like this. It would just be a flat line, basically, until I realized that, oh, yeah, by the way, the mouth has a natural curvature. The corners of your mouth are going to be further back and further towards, like, the back of your skull than your lips. So that adds a lot of... It gives it a more natural look, and that's a lot of depth to your mouth. So I'm kind of happy with this. That's good enough. I'm going to puff that out a little bit further. But I'm going to be moving on to filling in the rest of the head. So I think I'm going to be starting with the neck here. We already kind of mapped out where the neck kind of area would be. I'm going to rotate that to match kind of the choker here. So we've kind of got an idea already of how wide the neck's going to be. And we've got the basic makings of a neck here. I'm going to add a little bit more roundness to it by adding these, poking in just another 2 vertices. And that looks a lot more appealing already. I'm going to select these 3, extrude upwards, and fill in these parts. I'm going to smooth again, now that we've added more geometry. That needs to be pulled back much further. It doesn't really, but rather this needs to be pulled in over here further, like this. And then this needs to be lined up with the rest of the neck. And then this needs to be brought in line with the reference as well. And this is one of those reasons why we have the reference and why we're racing along it. It's eventually at some point you will have kind of a general understanding of anatomy and stuff. Like, even this neck kind of looks weird. It's not round, it's kind of squished in from the back. So I'm not entirely happy with that, but it's like, what can you really do? This, I guess. But I'm going to select these 3 vertices again, because we've got one more vert of neck remaining. Again, just extrude upwards. And fill in our last piece of the actual neck structure. Before we're going to start moving on towards connecting our chin to our neck. I'm going to select... I'm going to say 2 here. Maybe the 3rd one as well. Yeah, I'm going to select 3, considering this starts at the nose and kind of flows towards the throat kind of area. So, select anything that would, like, naturally connect towards this frontal area of the neck. And extrude that stuff. Fill in our straggler over there. I do want to preserve that vert, so once more, fill in our straggler. And then we need to find another solution on how to connect these over here. So this is pretty easy. That's very clear. We're going to need to add another loop here. And now we can fill in these. And then I could fill in that as well. Yeah, I'm going to continue with this. I can undo that at any point if I want, if it looks bad. But I'm going to keep it like that for now. I'm going to select these 2 over here and start building the back of the head. The back of the head's going to be easy. And I want to leave, like, I want to get everything easy out of the way first before I have to, like, actually think about how to fill a section. So I'm doing the bare minimum here to kind of puff out the skull again, because I know that we can fix that when we see the entire structure. Fill that in, and then this is a very clear solution. This is a very clear solution, so we need one more loop over there. And now we've got this side of the head that we need to fill in. We have 2 loops coming in from here, so I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to start extruding here. Very clear that we need at least 1 loop here. So 1, 2, 3. And we can fill that in. One more here so that we can do this. And then 1 here to match this. I'm not sure how to deal with that yet, so I'm going to leave it. 1, 2, 3. Fill these in. Fill these in. Then so this is 8. There should be a solution for this. I'm going to go up 1 more. Do it like this. Now we're down to 6. So how do we do this? That could be a face, and that could be a face. And that's, once again, this is... this is a very ugly kind of topology. Like, this kind of an abrupt ending to a strip of faces. To the point where I, like, is there any other way to do this? What if I did it like this? That's not much better. But the point is, we've filled it out. That's all that matters. So, and again, this kind of topology at the back of the head doesn't really matter. I'm going to keep on telling myself that. none of this is going to be animated, and the fact that it's if someone ever goes in here once the model is done, specifically hides the hair and goes and takes a look at our school topology, like at that point, like, whatever, you win. So I'm going to kind of try and get more of a head shape of it. You can see that we're very wrinkly over here. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to select as much of this as possible. All of these crimes we've committed here. Even this far. Smooth it a couple times. And kind of reform the head. And wow, it's already much better. This needs to be puffed out because we didn't smooth this part. So some work needs to be done here. I don't want it to be pulling on the eyes. Alright, so question. Don't know if you already explained it, but how do you fill those faces so fast? It looks like you just select one edge, and by just pressing F a few times, it fills up without selecting 4 verts. Yeah, that's actually really neat. If I go in here, and let's say delete all of those faces, sometimes Blender is able to figure these things out for us. So, we can all tell that this is very easy to fill in. Like, there's only one logical solution to how to fill this. We just fill in a straight line. So sometimes Blender is able to figure this out. So if I just select these two and press F, Blender knows that there's only one direction that he could possibly want to be filling in. So you'll run into a lot of these scenarios where that's possible. You'll also run into scenarios where, let's see if I can manufacture one of these. What would be difficult? Let's say something like this. If I select this, okay, it's able to figure that out. But was it able to figure that out better than I was? No, that's a triangle. Yeah, we don't want triangles. But yeah, sometimes you'll run into scenarios where Blender is unable to figure it out. I think this would be one. So if I delete these faces, fill this back in, select this, yeah. This doesn't work because we're using a mirror and Blender doesn't understand which direction to go to. So here, you'll need to fill those two in first and then you can do the rest. So back to puffing it out. That playlist is over, so I'm going to move on to a different Tuhu remix. Still don't like this ridge over here, so I'm going to smooth it out. I am going to smooth out the eye as well. This needs to be further up. Want more of a cheek over there. This needs to be widened. I actually need to make sure that, yeah, we're nowhere near to being matching with the frontal reference, so we've got a lot of space to go wide over here. Want to puff this out. Now, one of the other things with topology, where you'd ideally want to have decent topology, is stuff like this. You can see that there's a nasty little bump over there, and that's partially because of this kind of topology where all of these things kind of just intersect here. Smooth is going to be able to help us with this. So we've got a bump, no more bump. Actually, I only wanted to smooth once. But yeah, we possibly could have avoided that with better topology from the get-go. But, like, Smooth just figured it out for us, so not a big deal. I'm just kind of bouncing around everywhere at the moment, fixing a thing here and another one there, and that's just kind of how the workflow is going to be at times. Like, I want to fix the unevenness and bumpiness of the head, to have a more natural head shape. But in the process of doing that, I've noticed that the eyes no longer match the frontal reference. So I have gone in and fixed the eyes first. Make sure that the nose is where the nose is supposed to be. I kind of want to have the nose be from the side reference until the very last possible step. Because for the nose, we have zero detail, apart from the nose dot compared to all of the detail. I want to pull the chin down a little bit more so that we have that nice little angular thing going on over there. Not that much, though. A bit more reasonable. Yeah, more like that. Gonna smooth this. Smooth this again. Just take a look from as many angles as possible. There's still a bit of a hump here. So I want to... It would be so easy to fix it by doing this. Maybe if I have my proportional editing curve. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of done it. Yeah, just having a bigger proportional editing curve. I'm going to add a loop here. If I can do it cleanly. I might not be able to. So let's see, with, without. Yeah, I think the loop. Nah, it's not needed. It's nicer this way. This here is a problem. That needs to be puffed out a lot more. I kind of want to smooth this out completely. I want to have this loop and this loop be on the same level, even though we can see from the side reference that the neck does have rotation. I don't want to deal with that rotation at the moment. Have it like this so that we can kind of tell that we still need more of a circular thing going on here. Even though that is nowhere close to matching where the neck is actually supposed to be. I can now shrink it down. And that'll look a little bit nicer, hopefully. The neck is a little bit too wide here. So I'm once again going to select these loops. Scale X. And yeah. So from this angle, you can see that that's not very natural. I'm going to bring these in a little bit more with smooth. And then pull back again. That has helped a little bit. And then just select kind of this area. And puff it out. And much better. There's still a little bit of lumpiness. But that's one of those things where I'm not going to worry about it too much because I sometimes need to remind myself as well. Here's our head. Here's the amount of head that's going to be visible. About this little triangle over here. And then the face. Not even from the back, not even from the side. So, while it would be nice to have the perfect shaped, like smooth and so on head, I don't think anyone's ever going to be seeing this part that I'm fixing right now because it looks a little bit more lumpy than I'd like it to be. So I'm going to call it there. That's good enough. We have got our head and it's taken us an hour and 17 minutes, I think. Hour and 15, considering there was like an intro and all that. Still not happy with the cheeks completely, but that is something that we can fix later. I'm just going to make sure that we match our reference as closely as possible still. And then I'm going to move on to working on the eyes and like facial features. So for the eyes, we're going to add our second ever object. I'm actually going to close the end sidebar so that we've got a little bit more real estate. I'm going to add a circle, set this here to 8 vertices, Alt-G so that it moves to the middle where our 3D cursor is, just in case that it wasn't in the middle yet. That's going to be important for mirroring. And these are going to be our eyes. So over here, it's going to roughly place it where the eye would be. Give this one a mirror with clipping and subdivision surface double as well. And kind of try and have it match the eye. Some of the eye's not going to be visible, but that's fine. We're just going to approximate how tall the eye is going to be. Drag it to the right place and give it about the same rotation as our side profile. Again, this, for the eyes and for the mouth, the side profile is not representative, but it at least gives us a decent idea of how much rotation we need for the eye. It also tells us that our eye sockets are way too deep. So I'm going to want to do is select the corners of our eyes, pull them back in to about there. That looks a lot more natural. And I'm going to grab the end of our eye socket, bring it much further towards the eye, and kind of recenter it about that way. There's different levels of depth you can use for your eye sockets as well. And I wonder if the effect's going to come through this way already. Kinda, yeah, kinda. So when you've got more concave eye sockets, you get this effect of the character's eyes kind of following you around as you move the camera. I'm going to bump these up a little bit. Like that. But then if you have a more shallow eye socket, I'm going to hide the, or rather move the eyes up a little bit to about there. If you have a more shallow eye socket, this way, the effect is not as pronounced. You can tell that the eyes are actually not following you. I like the effect, so I like having things like this, and then the eyes a little bit further in the sockets. Kind of like this. I'm once more going to make sure that our sockets are where they need to be. And then I'm going to fill in our eyes. So I'm going to turn off proportional editing. Extrude and scale it in a little bit. Extrude again and scale it in a little bit further. I'm going to try and place this loop specifically about where the iris would be. Or the pupil, rather. And then I'm going to grid fill the rest. If it looks nice. If it doesn't, I might fill in by doing this. Yeah, this is nicer, so I'm not going to grid fill that. Going to flip the normals. Smooth. I'm going to add our third modifier of the series. I'm going to add a solidify modifier. And that just makes things solid. Have this be about 0.001. Maybe 0.002. Yeah, 002. And now we have nice little eye discs. There's something a little bit off about this. I'm hoping that the addition of eyebrows and eyelashes is going to fix. But if it doesn't, I'm going to go back to the to tweaking the face mesh a little bit. I think this is going to be fine. So there's our eyes. And this is about to be the time where I want to start the very basic foundations of texturing. I'm going to switch over to cycles. And I didn't prep this beforehand, but I'm going to open my reference sheet in an image editor. And you can't see this, but I'm going in and I'm just sampling the skin tone from the reference sheet. I'm going to go and add a new material. I'm going to call this skin. Set this, the surface shader, to Toon BSDF, just personal preference. I like how Toon looks. And set the color over here, paste in my skin color. Now if I press Shift Z to go to material display, you can see that our head is now skin colored. I'm going to add, first of all, I'm going to go into the world and enable ambient occlusion. Add another material. Duplicate our skin material, call this one sockets for our eye sockets. And just select our eye sockets here. Have this be emission and set it to be all white. And assign. Now we've got eye sockets. She looks very disturbing at this moment because of the very flat shading and lack of features and so on. I want to do this for the mouth as well, where I'm going to see... I don't think that... Yeah, there's nothing on the reference sheet that would be the actual color of the mouth. There's like lips and so on. So I'm going to choose the lip color. Copy that one. Add another material. Copy our skin. Have this be mouth. Set it to the different color and assign our mouth to it. And now you can see I didn't select the entirety of the mouth. There. Assign our mouth. And I actually don't want it to include this loop. There. So now we can kind of tell that the mouth exists behind that. And the reason I did this is I also want to fill in the eyes. So I'm going to sample 3 colors from the eyes. The eyes have some blue and some gray. As you can see, I can show in the reference sheet here. I'm taking this blue over here and this gray over here, and then the black for the actual pupil of the eye. So I'm going to copy our skin again, call this eye gray, and give it our gray. I'm going to copy the blue as well. Another material, and have this be eye blue. And I'm going to assign the lower portion of the eye to be blue. And then the reason why I specifically made it so that this section here kind of matches where the pupil is so that I can do this. Have this just be called black. Set the color to be black. And assign. And again, with the smirk and the expression of the eyes and so on, it's a little bit disturbing, but it gives our very basic model, no texture and so on, a little bit more detail, so we can kind of see things of, especially when we add more parts like the hair and so on, we can see possibly some mistakes and so on. I'm going to spare you the material display for now and go back to edit mode, and we're going to be working on the eyelashes now. For this, I like selecting about the area that the eyelashes would be covering in our head model. Shift D to duplicate, and I'm going to separate this to its own mesh. It inherits our modifiers, which is good. It doesn't need to inherit the materials. I can delete all of those. And then I'm going to hide the eye. For the time being, I'm also going to hide the head. And I'm just kind of going to, with proportional editing, try and trace the eyelashes. So these would end up somewhere over here. But we can take a look at our other side to kind of be able to tell that this is about where they should be. I can kind of see that there's another spike going over here behind the strand of hair. So I'm going to eyeball it towards here. And then there's a spike here. And I want to say there's a couple spikes here. So I know we're going to need several more loop cuts here. Undo the damage that's done. Have these fit here again. Add another loop there so that we don't have major distances between our loops. And then I'm going to... So this spike over here I'm going to do first. Add another loop over there. Having to work on the mirrored side is very painful. But I'll manage. Extrude this. Scale it down. I'm going to approximate where it would be. And then do the fine-tuning over here. Like this. I want it to be even sharper. I'm going to double extrude. That might have made it worse. That definitely made it worse. I'm not going to double extrude. I'm just going to have it be like this. And then kind of try and balance things out over here. That's fine. And then on this side, can't really tell. I'm going to say there's one spike. And that one spike comes from here. I'm taking some creative liberties here. When in doubt, I'm just going to blame the character artist for having an ambiguous reference sheet. Always works. So that's our rough sketch of the eyelashes. I'm going to hide our face now, and surprisingly our eyelashes are not really clipping into anything, but they're detached horribly. So I'm going to add a solidify modifier to these as well. Not that thick. I want it to be about 0.003 maybe. And then I'm just kind of, with proportional editing, going to pull this in and have them kind of be anchored to where our eyelid would be. I'm going to be using this modifier later on. Our fourth modifier of the series is going to be smooth. I don't think I'm going to actually be using this for the eyelashes because I want to keep the spikiness. But smooth is another cool modifier where you've already seen me use Q several times. What smooth does is it's basically a non-destructive Q. So I can set it up like that, double factor and triple repeat, and I can see that that smooths it out very nicely. So I honestly might still stick to using this and just now from here make sure that our that we kind of at least match where the actual eyelashes would be. That's not as spiky as I'd like it to be, so I'm gonna extrude another bit, move this further down, and then scale that down so we get the actual spikiness I want. And just add some more volume that we lost to our smoothing. spikiness here as well, and here as well. And then make sure that we're still okay over here. Kind of want to add a loop here. That would make this so much easier. Yeah, okay, that looks good. Happy with that. So now we're going to go back to making sure that it is actually attached to where our eyelids are. So this is where we're, once again, kind of going to have to decide between, do we want to 100% follow the reference sheet? Or do we want to kind of work with what we've actually created here? I'm going to work with what I've done. And instead of sticking 100% to the ref sheet, I'm going to reposition our eyelashes in a way that works with the head model we've made. So like this. And just try and make it so that it's glued on to where the eyelids are, so that we don't have stuff like this, for example, where you can see there's a big old gap over there. That shouldn't happen. This is one of those things that I like using materials for, instead of just relying on solid. You can kind of tell from this angle that you can see the eye and the eye sockets, but it's so much clearer when you're using materials. So I'm going to bring this in. Bring the spike further out. And again, like I said with the head, the actual time-consuming part in all of this, apart from stuff like texturing and so on, of course, but the actual time-consuming part of modeling, pure modeling, is always going to be trying to work with smoothing your geometry and making sure that it fits where it's supposed to be. This, I'm not 100% sure what to do with. Like, this should be much further up over here. This spike is very detached. It should be here, maybe. Kind of like this. I think that's better. And then I need to resolve this bump. Smooth a couple times. Should still be a bit connected. Now here's a limitation of the smooth modifier. I've mangled these eyelashes so bad that I can't scale this tip over here any further. It's just actually impossible. If I turned this off, you can see that it's already scaled down so far. So that's just gonna have to be like this, unless I turn off the smooth modifier. But I kind of like how it looks, so I'm gonna live with this. Once we're able to apply our modifiers, which is going to be very late, like deep into the entire series, I want to have something like this and something like this, so that it gets a little bit more curvature. But this is where I have to be a little bit conscious of the fact that our triangle count right now with a head, the eyes, and the eyelashes is 17,000. If I were to add in this, we jump up to 18.5. And even if we're going to be going and undoing our double subsurf at some point, for most things, probably not the eyelashes, but for the head, for example, there's not much of a difference there for what is almost 10,000 triangles worth of data. So I don't want to add this in right now. Once we're done and we enable our subsurf, we're going to have a loop there anyway, and we can add some volume that way. So still kind of just tweaking the shape of the eyelashes. That doesn't look ideal. Okay, that's a lot better. And then now, the eyelashes are not going to be 100% black. They're going to be like a very dark grey. I'm going to account for that by giving them their own material. And that's made everything a little bit less creepy. Like, I'm still not exactly happy with the smirk, but just having eyelashes, just not being completely clean shaven, is doing wonders already. So I'm checking to see if there's any air gaps. I don't think there are. These could be pulled in more. And that could be smoothed. And I'm kind of fine with this. Another question. What's the point of giving them separate material if you're going to delete it later when importing to PES? The reason I'm doing the materials right now, as of right now, is I just like how this looks compared to this. I like being able to see the individual parts and how they're playing out to see if, like, something needs to be fixed somewhere. And the other reason is going to be when we eventually get down to texturing, we're going to be using these materials. So, for example, the eyes over here. When we get to texturing, what I'm going to do is UV unwrap them, like this, and then I'm going to bake the correct materials into a texture, so that we're going to end up with a nice base texture that we can work with. That's going to have all of the colors that we've given over here already. It's not going to be as important for the eyes, because these are obviously not going to be the finalized eyes. But for things like clothing, the face, stuff like that, it's going to be very nice being able to start with a base texture that has already got the base colors. But yeah, it is very much a mixture of just personal preference and being able to use it for texturing later on. You don't have to do this, not at all, if you're fine working without materials and just working in solid mode and matcap. And I can see it being faster to do it that way if you're working on just head models and so on. But I personally like having the materials for as much of the process as possible, because I like looking at the model like this, and I like especially looking at the model like this, where there's not much to see here right now, but when you've got stuff like hair, I want to make the head wider. Like that. Much better. When you've got stuff like hair, for example, just being able to go into rendered mode and being able to see the progress you've made, and being able to see, like, oh, that hair, it might not look all that decent when you're in solid mode. I'm going to use the eyelashes as an example. These are still not ideal when you're in solid mode and you're looking at them like this and tweaking them around for 30 minutes and trying to get them as smooth as possible. When you switch to rendered, they look completely fine. Like, this is down the line when you're struggling with some piece of hair or piece of clothing. This is going to be a massive morale booster. At least it is for me, definitely. Being able to just do this and take a look at the model preview in rendered mode. So we've got most of our facial features now. We're only really missing the eyebrows. This is where the eyelashes start, and I've really seen two approaches for dealing with this. The one I use is I draw these on in the texture. I've seen some people have these actually modeled out and 3D, but I don't like doing it that way because if you think about it, again, using the human body as an example, like if you just touch your eyelids about where the eyelids actually start, you can tell that that's not a protrusion, that's a crease. So these are not going to be 3D, but rather these are going to be like a sunken in section where your eyelids start. And what we're actually seeing here is not something that's popping out like the eyelashes and eyebrows would be, but rather this is the shadow being cast into that little crease that your eyelids form. So I don't want this to be 3D modeled, I want this to be texture level. Unless we were like hyper realistic and we had like actual eyelashes starting from here and eyelids rather starting from here, then we would be able to take like an edge here and push it in and make that crease. But we don't have the resolution here to be able to do that. So I'm going to be drawing those on whenever we start texturing very, very later on. So instead I'm going to add another plane for us. Delete all the vertices. And I'm going to work on the left side for this one. Again, it's more visible. I can't really tell what's going on over there. But at least here I can kind of see where the eyebrows would be. So I'm going to poke in another starting vert. I'm going to add in our mirror and our double subsurf. And just sketch out our eyebrows. I think they're going to end about there. And then they're going to end about there. I specifically made sure that the bottom side has as many verts as the top side, so that I can once again do this, just fill in. Then I'm going to bring them to the front. I'm going to have an entire redo. I can do this better. I'm going to use snapping for this. I'm going to set the snap element to face and enable snapping and redo the thing I just did. I'm going to poke in our starter vert. And then if I switch to solid mode, you can see that as I'm moving the vert around, Blender is trying to snap it to the next object. So you can see that it's hidden just underneath the surface of our head. And this saves us from the trouble of tracing our eyebrows from one side and then having to go in and bring them back to the front and then curve them to fit our head later on. So I'm going to do the same thing though. Match the vert count of the bottom and the top. Then fill in. Disable our snapping, we don't need it anymore. Bring our eyebrows to the front a little bit. Make sure that the normals are facing the right way. They're not, I just broke them. So undo what I did. And then we're going to add a solidify to this as well. Have it be about the same thickness as our eyelashes. That's even a little bit too thick. I want it to be like maybe even 0.001. Brows are not going to be very thick. And then we're going to try. That really doesn't want to bend the way I want it to. There we go. Just going to try and have them look nice. I'm going to add another loop over there. Just going to have them even thickness. That's a little bit too thick still. And then make sure that they're not actually clipping into the head. Or make sure that they are not detaching from the head. Like this. Something that screencast keys does not pick up is if you're selecting something and you want to snap into an axis, or if you're, let's say, scaling or rotating something and want to snap to an axis, what you can do is G, for example, for grab, and then with your mouse, click your middle mouse button as you're moving along the axis you want to snap to. So if I grab, move my mouse upwards and click my middle mouse button, the geometry I've got selected will move along the Z-axis. And that's how I'm, like, doing all of these manipulations so fast. I'm not using the keyboard, but I'm rather using the mouse. So, scale that up a little bit. Like that. And then I'm gonna... Okay, the eyebrows are the same color as the lashes, so I can reuse the material for the lashes. And we've got our facial features. And that, once again, has given our character a lot more character. Like, just having expression and not just having to derive that expression from the eyes and the eye sockets and the mouth, and just having eyelashes and eyebrows, it does a world of wonder already. So, the one thing we're obviously still missing from our head is the ears. And there's two types of scenarios. Luckily, very well illustrated by this model again. If you have a situation, like we've got on the right side over here, where that's all the ear you can see, even from the side reference, no ear at all. That is really all the ear you can see. Situations like that, especially if you know that the model's going to be for pests, for example, it's never going to have something like different hairstyles or something. You don't need to model the ears. The ears are completely optional. The other scenario, left side here, the ear is more than half or even completely visible. You can't get away with it. You have to model the ears. And unfortunately, ears suck. I personally hate ears. Like, if you've ever taken a look at an ear real close up, it's like, what is this? So I've got a hopefully painless way of doing ears. Is kind of, first of all, figure out whereabouts the ear's gonna start. Maybe even down here. And again, I'm gonna be going back to this several times during the series. Just remember that you yourself are a fantastic reference for this kind of stuff. So if you place your fingers about where your ear is at its lowest point, about where the ear lobe is, and kind of trace across to the front of your face, you're going to be meeting your nose in about the middle, and you're just going to be skirting underneath your eye sockets. So with that in mind, the eye placement I've got here, these two faces, are going to be about correct. You can do the same for the top of your ear, where if you do the same, you're going to be meeting your eyelashes, your eyebrows rather. So around the top of your eye socket, and that also kind of matches. I can move these verts up a little bit so we have a little bit more clearance. And then I'm going to delete these faces and just the faces. And this is going to be where we're starting with our ears. So, again, should have started on the left side, but I'm going to be on the right side. I'm going to extrude again, and I'm going to close that up. And that's our basic, very, very basic shape of the ear. Going to move things around so that it's not pointing in a weird direction. Kind of like this. I'm going to refer over here to see just about where these parts should be. I need to move the starting point up a little bit. So I'm going to select the entirety of the ear. Select this loop as well. Move up a little bit. It's a bit more like it. Go over here. And kind of try and trace the ear. The ear is something that you will likely never be able to trace 100%. I can also tell that this needs to be further down. Even if you had a really good reference, you'd have to improvise with the ear. The ear is going to be the true test of, like, how comfortable you are with just eyeballing things. So we can get the basic idea of how far it should be, like, protruding and so on. But that's about it. I don't like the curvature of the ear there, so I'm going to move things around a little bit. Then I'm going to bring this in, and that's one of the most important things. That'll add some of the natural, like, curvature to the ear, especially around the bottom there. I want to have another loop around here so that we can get the... If I hide everything, I want this ridge over here is going to be another defining part of the ear. That how visible that's going to end up being in the final model is going to depend on our texture, but I do want it to be visible at just a mesh level already. So I'm going to use the knife tool. Unfortunate thing about our modifiers is that we can't use the knife tool as is. I'm going to have to disable our subsurf, and you can see... This is where you can see just how much we are benefiting from our subsurf. This is the model I've wound up with so far without the subsurf. Like, it's recognizable. You can kind of tell what it's going to be, what's supposed to be going on here. You might even be able to salvage this and make something low poly. This is less than 200 faces for an entire head. I'm not about to be doing that. I want it to look like this without putting in too much work myself. But for now, we're going to have to disable that, because I also want to rescue this vert from here and bring it here. For now, we need to be able to see what we're working with, because I want to use the knife tool to add another loop over here. So that's our extra loop, but the problem we've got right now is that the rest of our head is very nice and cooperative and has quads. The problem is that this and this that we've created by having our extra loop for the extra definition, and also this and this, these are n-gons. These have 5 vertices, they've got 5 sides, and these have 6 vertices. We need to fix this. I don't want any n-gons in our model. It's nicer to work with quads. So these ones have an obvious solution. We have a face that is 4 sides. We have a face that is 6 sides. So what we can do is take the corners over here, connect them, and all of a sudden we've got 3 faces of 4 sides again. This one's going to be more difficult. I'm actually going to delete these 2 faces so that we end up in a situation where we have a loop with 8 vertices. I'm going to enable our subsurf again so that we can see a little bit better. And filling this in is going to be interesting. For the last model I did, I had an easy solution for this. I can't remember that easy solution. So it would be like... Okay, yeah, it would be like this. Yeah, that's fine. That's completely fine. And now we have another level of detail and definition here we can work with and do things like this. Now we've got the ridge. It doesn't look very good. We're going to need to work to make it look a lot better. We might even need to add another layer of definition. So the width is still fine. This is about the point where I'm going to start ignoring the reference for the ears and just kind of play it by eye. do my best to just make it look decent without ever looking at the reference and seeing how it's actually supposed to be. So there's supposed to be the little bump over there. We need to bring this out further so that we can bring this in further. I kind of still want to have another loop over there, so I'm gonna... Wow, can I even make this work in without subsurf? I need to start from here and go about there. So start from here and do that. I think that's another playlist done. Yes. We're going here. And then another loop cut here, so that we end up with quads. This is going to be impossible to find. It's this over here. Loop cut there, so we have quad, quad, all quads. Delete these faces. Now we can switch back to subsurf so that we can see a little bit more clearly. And this is again 8. So... Oh, but unfortunately 4 of these are on... Well, 5 of these are on this side. Gonna get interesting. Okay, that still works out fine. These need to be much further in here. This can't be bent as far back as it is right now. This needs to be much slimmer. It's looking a lot better now. And again, with our extra detail and definition over here, we can try and construct the, like, weird bumpiness of the ears. I want this to be a little bit bigger. And this a little bit smaller. Hit that with a smooth and then bump it out again. Bring that out a little bit. Try and add that little curvature here. Yeah, more like that. This comes in a little bit further as well. And then all of this is brought out. Not as much though, like this. I'm just eyeballing this. This is all just me trying out different things and trying to make things look like somewhat decent. So this should be further up here. I had it decent at some point and then I messed with it a little bit further and now it's gotten worse. Okay, smooth helped a lot. I think this still needs to be brought further in like this. And now if I look at the reference again, something I promised I wouldn't do, I'll bring this back a little bit more. Bring this in a little bit more. Like this. Okay, and that's actually very decent. We have, after I kind of give this a bit of a smoothing, we have a decent eye. That's a very decent eye. Ear. Smooth that out as well. And yeah, I'm completely fine with that. That's... Now, a lot of how that ends up looking like is going to be determined by our texture work. But that's got to be one of the, like, from a solid mode viewpoint, that has to be one of the more pleasing ears I've made. So really happy with that. And now if we unhide everything and go to rendered mode, we can see that this here needs to be bumped out pretty bad. Like that, and then I want to say maybe this needs to be squished in a little bit. Like this. And then now, if we render, we should have a little bit of shadows catching over those ears. And I am really happy with this. So we've got our base head model. And that's taken us about 2 hours. And that includes a lot of fiddling with smoothing out things and so on. So once you've done a couple of these, and once you've gotten comfortable with the process, it's going to take anywhere from 1 hour to 2 hours to get to this point with a head. And also, I'm doing all of this from scratch, but like Scully's tutorial earlier on, there's nothing wrong with using an existing model for your head, even for your hair, for all of the details on your head. And that'll shave a lot of time off any like full body models that you need to do. If you've got a library of head models and bodies and so on. So anytime, for example, I'm working on something that is maybe in a hurry, an aesthetics request, for example, where there's, let's say, a week to get a full body model with custom clothing done, I'll just recycle a body. Like, I'll grab a body of a model I've made, if it has the correct proportions, and if it doesn't have the correct proportions, what I'll end up doing is I'll just use ENF. Like any PES-ready, semi-naked body model that you can then fit clothes on. So, even though this entire series is going to be doing things from scratch, there's nothing wrong with recycling and using existing models for the stuff you want to do. So I'm going to start working on the hair now, I think. Because if we look at the ref sheet, the next closest things to our head would be the earring that we can see here, but can't really see clearly here. And earring is part of accessories. That's one of those things that I want to do with the clothing. And oh yeah, like Scully says in chat, you'll learn a lot about just working in 3D. Like, even if you're never planning on like making custom models for PES or for yourself or anything like that, even just the process of like watching through Daniel's tutorials on YouTube or following along with this series and so on will teach you so much about like manipulating geometry in Blender and all of that stuff. So that's going to be really helpful for when you're working with any kinds of models in Blender for port. Like, let's say that you have a model that you want, a full body model that you want to put into PES, but it's just got some obvious issues. Like, some of the scenarios I've come across with VT, for example, have been that there's been an existing model for a character, but the guy that made it never used any modifiers and did not understand a thing about face. Not even, I don't even want to say topology, just face physiology and like how a face is formed and how human faces work. And like the clothes and the body and so on were completely fine, but the faces were completely flat. So you come across one of those, but you've got some understanding of how 3D modeling works and how to like better manipulate things in Blender, you'll be able to fix the flat face and you'll be able to use that model without having to like resort to maybe hunting for another model or using a koikatsu or anything like that. But yeah, I want to move on to working with the hair, because I consider the earrings to be part of like clothing and accessories, so that's going to come later, around the same time as the choker and the hair clip, I imagine. So this will become obvious. Hair, along with shoes, are the two things I despise the most about modeling. I hate hair. It's terrible. This seems simple enough, but it's just like, this is hopefully going to be the last time I use this method, and I'm about to show, and I finally go and sit down and learn the curves method after this one. But technically, I want to say that with this method, with what I'm about to do for several hours, you could end up with better end results if you're willing to put in the time. But the problem is you're going to be putting in the time. So you'll see soon enough. Yeah, shoes are absolutely horrible. I'm actually going to save here for that O2 head. It's like, these shoes are not that bad. Like, these are fine, kinda. I still dislike making shoes, but these are just a tube with a heel. But what I'm talking about is if I return to our mystery character here that no one will be able to recognize. This is my approximation, not textured. These are going to look better. This is what I'm talking about. This is just evil. Like, how are you even supposed to approach this kind of a thing? This is my best attempt at making that work, and I'm hoping that texturing is going to be able to salvage that. But yeah, shoes suck. Don't like. So for the hair, I'm going to do the exact same thing as we've started with other things as well. I'm going to add mesh and plane, just so that we can have an empty mesh with 0 vertices that we can start working with. So I'm going to start with the frontal hair, and over here we can see that there's no way this could be mirrored. Not a chance. So I'm just not going to have a mirror modifier for that. Actually, none of this hair can be mirrored. Maybe the back here. Maybe this part. But definitely not the front. Not the bangs at all. So I'm going to skip out on the mirror modifier, but I'm going to add a subsurf. Double. And I am going to enable snapping. Going to hide actually everything other than our head and plane 3, which is going to be our hair. And I'm going to poke a vert about where the clump of hair that I want to work with starts. I'm actually going to do this first. This is going to be separate from that over there. So I'm going to put it here. And I'm going to kind of trace the clump of hair I want to be working on. Again, trying to match the amount of vertices on each side. And then one more so that we can have them meet here. Fill in all of that. And if I turn on snapping and shrink fatten a little bit, we now have our starting clump of hair. So I'm going to very lightly try and match the... For now I can hide the head so I can see a little bit better. I'm going to try and match the shape of the larger clump. Like this. And then by the time we get to the tips of the hair, we just have a lot of separation. So I'm going to try and separate these clumps accordingly. Need to delete that because that's a triangle. Add a loop cut here. And select everything up until that point, not including the vert where the hair splits, and press V to rip. I'm going to reposition my now separated strands of hair. I can see that this curves in over here. So something along those lines. Like that. And then this is going to be on top. And over here. It's going to curve more in this direction. I'm not going to worry about the other splits yet. I just want to get this hair back into the general shape that's going to be following. And our next splitting point is going to be here. So add another loop and another loop. And we're going to split here. Sure, our splitting point is actually where we want it to be. And rinse and repeat. Reposition and scale and so on this strand so that we have it's actually a bit difficult to see, but yeah, it's gonna go over here, here, and ends over there. So our I'm not sure if that is a splitting point at all. It doesn't seem to be. It just seems to be like we can see over here, for example, just kind of a highlight. So I'm not going to call that a splitting point. And instead, the next one's going to be over here. So I'm going to move this strand to be in the correct scale and location up until that point. And then I'm going to add our loop cut, split. This strand is now finalized because, where is it? What is this? I think that comes from the same strand. I don't think that's behind. Yeah, no, I don't think that's behind. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to add another loop here. I'm just going to have it shooting off the side here. Like that. And then this is one we haven't fixed yet. So these are going to be in front again. So this entire clump is going to be further up over here. So we've got some layering going on. And then this is one of the slight problems with Waifu 2x for upscaling, is that sometimes the lines between strands of hair can become a little difficult to see. I think it's here. So over there, make sure it's in front. It is going to be tipped here like that. And then this separation point should actually be more like over here. Kind of like that. I want to add it a little bit of curvature this way. Gonna need to add another loop there. Give it a little bit more curve. I kind of want to have this curving backwards. Another loop there, more curve here as well. This is going to be another one of those time-consuming parts where I personally spend a lot of unnecessary time in trying to make like the curvature of the hair look more natural. So this, from the side, we can tell needs to be more curved. Kind of like this, maybe. So does this. And kind of like these as well. And that's a little bit more natural again. This should be more forward. And as a result, this should be more forward. And as a result, these should be more forward. And as a result, these should be kind of curving back now. Like that. Do you want them to be a little bit flat still? We could see from the side as well. I've found out that one of the, again, worse reference sheet things is that front and side hair, especially for the front, is not going to match up that well. This is actually pretty decent. Like, I can generally get an idea of where these things should be. So these are, like, kind of supposed to be over here, which makes no sense because then they would be clipping into the head. So this is kind of what I'm talking about. From the front, the furthest to the right of us they go is about where the eye starts, and then over here. Yeah, I guess that does make sense. So these are not supposed to be as far out. Kind of more like here. I still don't think there's any possible way of me being able to curve this here acceptably. Well, maybe there is. No, that's going to clip into the head. So this is another one of those where just kind of going to have to try our best to do as the original artist intended. And then for the rest, we're just going to have to improvise. It does make sense that these strands would be a little bit thicker. So this one wants to be about over here with this side curving in. Kind of like this. And then this side like this. And then just kind of smooth out the rest of it so there shouldn't be that big of a gap between these two strands. So this one can go up a little bit. This is another one where we can hit it with a little bit of a smooth. Gonna lose a lot of volume. So I don't actually like that. I'm going to delete the smooth, and I'm just going to work with what I have. This needs to be in front. That needs more curve. That kind of needs more curve. I don't like the geometry over here all that much. To the point where I'm actually going to delete that face. Kind of do it like that. Flows a little bit nicer. Doesn't fix the problem that this... I'm going to need to add a loop over there. Another thing where better planning would have saved me from a bit of trouble. But it's whatever. So this needs to stay in front still. Don't go too far. Give that a little bit of volume. Volume. Add a loop there. This is one of the easiest ways to give a strand of hair some volume. Add a loop in the middle. And just have it jot out like that. And all of a sudden it's not flat anymore. It's got a little bit of a curvature to it in the middle as well. And that's more like hair. So sometimes that's going to be one of those things that I do after I've applied my modifiers and I've got a lot more geometry to work with. But this time, since these are the front bangs as well, these are going to be like the one thing that your attention is going to be drawn to when you're looking at the head of our model. I kind of want to add that kind of depth already. Although, as you can see, 21,216 triangles, 21,504. So even though that does not increase our try count too much, it still increases our try count. So that's why I try to avoid things like this until the last possible second. And this is going to be difficult to bump up that way. I actually hate this geometry right now. Like, this right here is unfortunate. But whatever. I do think this is still a part of this, like, collective of hair. So it just has to be like this. So then I'm going to bring... And another unfortunate side effect of adding all of those loop cuts is that we wound up with this. There's a lot of density over here that I don't like. But we're going to live with that for now. I'm going to take these and just kind of pull them back towards the head so that we don't have any kind of an unnatural elevation. Bring these down a little bit. Smooth them out. But still make sure that they match where our frontal part is. And then I'm not... Like, this strand looks really nice. I'm a bit more reserved about these two. But I think if I pull that forward a little bit, smooth that and pull it forward a little bit, smooth, figure that out, and then apply a solidify, and have our solidify be about 0.005. I hate this section still. You can see that in the solidify it makes things worse. So I am considering running another line from there. You know, it's going to be fine for now. I'm going to worry about that later if it doesn't end up looking good. So I'm going to take one last look to see if... It's going to be very difficult to see. I'm going to take one last look to see if there's any tweaking we need to be doing with our... in regards to our reference sheets and so on. The fact that the solidify modifier makes things uniform, I think that might be too thick still. I'll drop that down to 003, and that's going to be better. The solidify modifier makes things uniformly solid. So, whereas I could buy this here, being as thick as it is, maybe even thicker, these tips don't need to be this thick. They would be thinning out normally. But that's also something that we're kind of just going to have to deal with and hopefully fix later on. Once we're able to apply these modifiers before we start. Well, really, after we're done rigging, basically. But this is also one of those things that, even though the front bangs like this are going to be pretty much the centerpiece of the head, you're not really going to notice this. Like, you're not going to be zooming in and taking a look at how the tips of the hair are thicker, basically, than the actual top of the hair. And texturing is going to make a big difference in there as well. Add a loop there, smooth, add some curve. And these are those kinds of scenarios where after one or two more tweaks here and there, like this, I'm just going to have to tell myself that we need to move on. Can't spend the entire 4 hours on fixing one piece of hair. so I'm going to call that about good. I'm going to go and color pick a color for our hair. And for future reference, of all of the colors that are in the hair, this one, this one, this one. For the base color, I'm going to be picking this one. Because it's the most widespread. And this is clearly a highlight, and this is clearly a shade. So this is going to be more like the natural color of the hair. So I've color picked that one. And I'm going to give the hair its own material. With the right... That's not the right color. I actually didn't copy the color value. That's more like it. And then if we go to our material preview, you can see that we have a clump of hair now. And this is another thing I'm going to save here. 03 front hair. I'm going to reload a startup file and open another project called 53 Done. And show here just how much of a difference a texture makes. So look at this front hair. That's a bit of a mess. Not ideal. And this is with the modifiers all applied, by the way, except armature. So there's nothing you can do about this. So that doesn't look very ideal when you're looking at it in solid mode. But then when you turn on textured mode, it gets a lot better. Your attention's drawn elsewhere, and you don't really see the juttiness anymore. And then if you turn on rendered mode, all of a sudden you don't really even realize it anymore. You zoom out a couple clicks, and it's just... no one's going to notice the fact that you had, like, suboptimal topology and so on. So that's why I am not going to care too much about the fact that I'm not 100% happy with, like, the curvature and look and so on of our hair, except for the fact that I'm going to patch that gap a little bit. And I'm just going to move on to adding more of the hair pieces. So that was our front. And the topmost layer of our front. So what I'm going to do next is this one here. The, like, left side piece of our front bangs. And then the one after that is going to be this little strand over here. Just figuring out the playlist. Okay, we're going here. I'm going to start working on the left side. So again, I'm going to hide everything other than our head so that our snapping tool is not going to get distracted by any other geometry. I can bump the volume down again. Add mesh plane. At this point, I'm going to start giving these names as well. So this is going to be head. Our circle, that we can't see because we hid it. Our circle is going to be our eyes. Plane 1 is our eyelashes. Plane 2 is our eyebrows. Plane 3 is our hair front top. Or rather, hair front middle, I want to say. And this is going to be our hair front left. So now I'm going to hide everything except our hair front left and head. And I'm going to start tracing our leftmost middle clump. So again, we can't use a mirror modifier, but we can use a subdivision surface. And I need to remember to turn on my snapping. Try and match the number of vertices. Did actually match it this time. So I'm going to disable snapping and bring our piece of hair to the front. Oh, pattern actually stretches it out, so I don't like that. I'm just going to grab it along Y. I think it might have still clipped on to something else, so this needs to be kind of repositioned a little bit. And unfortunately, this one, I don't think we can see from the side. Yeah, it's going to be over there. So, not visible. So we don't have a side reference for this piece. We're going to have to improvise. But considering we have a decent reference for this frontal piece, we should have a decent idea of how this piece of hair is going to behave. I want to extrude that one bit further, because it does start over there, even though it only separates over here. And just kind of trace the outline, which we've done decently already. Yep, happy with that. It's a weird curve. I don't necessarily hate this curve that it's doing, but I'm going to smooth it out a little bit. And then let's see. We have very clearly a middle bit separation here. I'm going to add another loop here and just move this one further up. And split there into our two sides. This one needs another loop. And does this side really does not have anything else, so that's this side done. And then the other side does have a lot of splitting. So here, I'm going to add a loop, add a loop. This moves further up. The constant selecting everything is just so that I see better. It's a little bit hard to see where vertices are in this mode, like in wireframe without having anything selected. Especially against the wireframe background of our head model and just the reference sheet. So me constantly pressing double A is just trying to find out where my vertices are hiding. So split over there and do the left side first. But where does that go? It just kind of ends. Okay. So, like this. This needs a loop cut. And it splits into two, I want to say. Yeah, just a split over there. So one more loop cut over there. Split. Ideally, I wouldn't need to add one here. I'm going to need to add one here to get the spikiness. Yeah, now all of a sudden I don't like that weird curve. So it's going to move forward. And then it's going to move backwards. Like this. And that's a more natural curve. I'm also going to rotate along Z. Actually, I'm not going to do that. That will screw with the frontal reference. I think these need to be wider. They're just buried underneath the front middle. There's no way this side would be further forward than this side. So pull these back a little bit. And then we just don't know how these are going to behave on, like, the y-axis. So I'm going to say all of these just kind of pull back a little bit. Some of them more than others. Kind of like this. This also should not be as forward. But this should be more forward. And again, I'm just looking for kind of a natural curve. Smooth those out. Make sure the separation over here happens at the right spot. That's a very, very sharp corner over there. That's helped a little bit. I don't necessarily hate it being that sharp either. That might be fine. I want to add another loop over there so that I can do the neat little death brick like this. Maybe even more. Yeah, I like that. Not going to do that for the rest of them yet, because that would just add another level of unnecessary triangles. Pull that back a little bit to be more in line with the others. Pull these forward a bit. And actually do that for the entire rest of the strand. Pull these forward a bit to add some depth. Smooth a little bit. Yeah, I like that. Pull that forward. Pull that backward. And pull this more towards the head. And we are a bit far from the head, but that's what we're going to unhide our front hair for. This would be the time to add our solidify as well. So solidify and 003. So that's the same thickness. And just pull it back. And now we can see that all of this should be hiding underneath our middle piece. And ideally, I want this to be even wider over here so that we don't have a massive gap of like exposed forehead underneath. So make that wide, this wide, and this can be wide as well. And now we've got a nice little bit of natural layering to our hair as well. So pull this back. Add more curvature. Same for this. And then give this the hair material. Not sockets, but hair. And if we go to rendered, this will look a lot nicer. Because now, with more geometry, we're finally starting to see the benefits of our toon shader. Now we can see a little bit of shade from where the hair is casting a shadow on our head. And the hair is also able to cast a shadow on itself. So compared to this, or even this, we see a lot more detail here, and a lot more nice shade. It's making me feel like this is not wide enough. So I'm going to ignore the ref sheet for a bit and just widen that out. Much happier with the second piece of hair, honestly. Like anything to the left of this separation, completely fine. Anything to the right, I'm worried about. But I promised I wouldn't touch that again. So I'm going to leave it for the time being. And move on to our third piece of front bangs. It's going to be this. It's the lowermost piece. The smallest piece, so I'm just going to add mesh plane. Delete the faces. Can't mirror it, but we can subsurf. The reason I'm not adding Solidify immediately is because I dislike working with Solidify. Like, I think I'm able to see things better when I'm working with just a subdivision surface and not a Solidify. Like, I can kind of show it here. If I add a Solidify and enable it in edit mode, it makes those like double vertices. So I don't like this. So I can just kill the Solidify and work with my subsurf and then only start adding the Solidify once I'm happy with the general shape of the strand of hair and need to see it with some actual volume that the Solidify provides. So this goes up here. And just kind of match the vertices again, and then this also ends up about where the other pieces start. I didn't enable snap for that, so this is what happens when you don't enable snap. You get to go and kind of bend it into shape yourself. It also messes with your... I'm honestly just going to redo that with snapping on. Like, snapping for this kind of thing is so useful that I'd rather just start over but with snapping on this time. Because it lets me follow along the kind of shape of the head. The one problem with snapping is that you shouldn't be moving more than one vert at a time. It doesn't behave well. So disable snapping now and move our strand to the front, and you can already see that we now have some side depth to our hair. And that's the point of using the snapping. It follows the curvature of the actual head more nicely. And this one shouldn't have any... It does have a very tiny bit of splitting over here. But apart from that, it is just a straight strand of hair, and we include the pink. Make that straight. Add another loop here, so that we can make the end spikier. And then we make the end spikier, and the separation happens over there. Not going to worry about that right now. I still want to make the actual strand of hair first. And then now we can go back and take a look at the separation. So we need a loop there and a loop here. Another loop there so that we can get the curvature and the spikiness. Same here, another loop for the curve and spiky. And then I want this. Again, I don't think we have... Oh, that is really wide. Yeah, okay, see, this is kind of what I'm talking about. From the front, we can see that this strand of hair... Well, unless it's... No, it wouldn't be this. This is the entire side strand. Yeah, from the front we can see that this strand that we're working on right now reaches about the middle of the eye. And over here... Well, again, it kind of does reach the middle of the eye. But it's impossible to match these two. Like, having this vert here, and then also having it over here. Impossible. If I wanted to have it on the surface of the head, actually, I'd have to move it very, very far to the right. So this is another one of those where you're just going to have to decide that, okay, do I want to work with the frontal reference or the side reference? And it's the frontal hair, so I want to work with the frontal reference. Luckily for me, the character artist has left a lot of room for error. So this strand here, eventually when we make that one, that can be wider and cover a lot more area. This side strand can cover a lot more area. This side worries me a little bit, but we'll get to that when we get to that. For now, I do know that the artist wanted this to reach as far across as possible, so I'm going to do this. Including these parts, which is not going to look ideal. Like, I just don't like that. I'm going to have to move this along Y and just hope that widening this bit is going to help. It kind of has, so it's going to be fine. We can add a little bit spikiness over there. And thanks to our snapping, this piece of hair actually has a nice natural curvature already. Like, there's not a whole lot I need to be fixing here. Thanks to our snapping and the fact that we moved this closer towards the actual head itself. I might even move this closer. I actually think I will. Yeah, I will, because this has to be hidden underneath our middle piece of hair. In fact, I think this... I'm going to have to undo our natural curvature that I was so happy with. Because this is very clearly the lowest piece of hair. And it only slightly pokes out from underneath, where there's no other hair to, like, obstruct the view. So that is including this. There is supposed to be a gap there, that's fine. This needs to be wider. Well, it looks very bad when it's wider, so it's just going to have to be like this. If not the solidify, I'm happy with the overall shape, but I do need to look at it solidified so I can see things like this where I want to say, in general, as a whole, for the entire hair, I want the curvature to be more like this. So I'm going to need to have this here curving like this as well. And all of this is going to have to curve further. I'm not really a fan of that, so I'm going to undo most of the things on this clump. I can't, because I undid on the wrong thing. Okay, that's still better. That has more curvature, and I can, like, maybe give this a little bit more curve here on the y-axis, like that, and then move this like this. Happier with that. This still needs to be straightened out a little bit, like this. Just trying to eliminate any kind of unnatural flow of the hair. Because if we look over here, this is very straight hair. Just a little bit of curvature here at the tips. But apart from that, it's going to be very, very straight hair. So we don't want stuff like this, for example. That wouldn't be natural. And again, it's always worth trying, seeing if smooth would do anything. It smooths it out, but I don't exactly want it smoothed out, so yeah, whatever. I'm going to keep that in mind and carry on like this. A little bit of a bump here that I want to smooth. About this layering, we're going to worry about that much later. We're going to find a way to hide that, or we're going to find a way to kind of connect everything together. Not super happy with this here either. That's a little bit better. And then the classic little trick of, we don't have a whole lot of room to do this, but we can add a small bit of curve to the middle of our hair, including this bit here. And that makes it look a little bit nicer. We just need to make sure that it doesn't poke through here. And again, if we go to rendered, we're starting to get somewhere. Oh, I need to... If you're going to be using cycles for this, and if you have a GPU that supports rendering, you have to go to your setting. I don't exactly remember where this is. You have to go to your settings, and somewhere in the settings, enable GPU rendering. But when you have enabled GPU rendering, you can go in the render tab and set your render device to GPU compute. And let's see, it takes about 1.6 seconds to render the entire scene right now on GPU. On CPU, it takes long. It takes long, 5 seconds. So I'm going to be doing a whole lot of this, just rotating around, taking a look at things from different angles and so on. So having a... Well, this time it took a while, but having a render that takes about half the time, sometimes less than half the time, is going to be valuable, very valuable in the end, in the long run. Would I be able to add? I would be able to add the ink strip here. So, yeah, okay, yeah, this is going to work. just for an added bit of niceness, I'm gonna sample the pink in the hair. I'm actually gonna sample the pink in like the wings of the reference sheet because that's a cleaner pink. And it's gonna be the same shade of pink anyway. And I'm gonna first give this the hair material. And then I'm gonna give it the hair highlight. And that would be the pink, and then assign our little highlight to it. And that's just, again, it's it's the small things where it's going to be nicer to look at now, seeing that, oh yeah, there's different colors in my hair now. I've made some progress. I'm not exactly sure what is casting this shadow over here on top of the nose. But I also kind of like it. I shouldn't widen this out any further. Just looks a bit... Yeah, I should definitely bring it in further. Kind of like this. Yeah, okay, that does look natural. Because we're going to need to have this gap over here. Alright, so the cup's starting in 4 minutes, and I did say that I don't want to exactly overlap. Unless people would be fine with overlapping with the cup. I don't personally care that much. And I know that for some people it would be better starting these later, even on the weekends. But I'm going to be aiming to do maybe a couple more pieces of the hair, and then I'm going to end it for today. We've made a lot of progress already. Like, considering it's been 3 hours, 3 productive hours basically, we've gotten pretty far. Like, there's at least another 3 hours, let's be real, in the hair, I imagine. Maybe not. This scares me. The amount of separation and amount of different strands that are over there is... That might take a lot of time. But yeah, we've made decent progress. So I kind of want to finish the frontal hair then. So I'd want to add this strand, I'd want to add the ahoge, and I'd want to maybe add this lowest strand over here that probably runs behind the ear. You haven't been here the entire duration, Beebs. I've already given my speech about things I hate, including character artists, hair, and boots, so... Yeah, I'm going to start with... Part of me also wants to do this long strand, but I think it would be better if I had that done first. Yeah, I'm going to leave that for later. That's... These kinds of strands of hair are my favorite. Just long, long, thin strands out of nowhere. But yeah, I'm going to do this, and this, and this, and then I'm going to call it good for the initial stream. So, once again, hide everything else. Rename our plane to be hair front right. Add mesh plane. Delete everything that's there. Enable our snapping. I'm not going to do subsurf immediately for this because it's so thin. I'm actually going to need to be able to do this without any smoothing first. And now that we've got kind of a strand of hair, here's another problem with snapping. Sometimes this happens. It's snapped into the eye socket, but that's at least easy enough to fix. Then I can smooth that. Subsurf twice. I'm actually surprised that we're only at 30,000 triangles for the entire character as well. Like, You'd imagine that even this amount of hair double subsurfed would be outrageous. But somehow we've kept it clean. So how does that connect to anything? It just kind of does. Okay. So like this, and then it's just gonna do that. Yeah, whatever. I maybe should have done this hair piece that rolls into behind the ear first, so that would have any reference where this ends, but whatever. And I can tell that this is curved. Kind of like this. Even further up, kind of like this. So that gives it a little bit more width this way. And like this. Well, then it does end up like that. I've kind of undone the curvature there. But that's whatever. I want to add this and do this. Because this is going to be one of these strands of hair where it's very curved down the middle. I want that to be much flatter. That's not sharp. But this is. And then, yeah, just give that a solidify. Have it be as solid as the entire rest of the hair. Need to figure out something about this. Like that. Well, okay, that cap's going to be close by this strand over here. So that's whatever. Give it the hair material. See it in rendered. Looks fine. It could curve a little bit more. Like this. And then move on to the other side. So this here, it's going to be more extensive again. I wouldn't even know what to call that. Hair front left 2. That's going to be your name. And again with snapping on. And without subsurf, I'm going to trace this piece over here. We're kind of flying blind at the moment with this piece. There's not a whole lot of help the artist is giving us. Oh, this is, by the way, this is what happens when you do 2 vertices with snapping. Not a good time. So you'll want to do 1 at a time. Disable our snapping. Drop that on the x-axis, actually, and then a little bit of y. This is going to widen. And wind up about here. I'm not going to worry about where this ends yet. It's going to look very stupid from the side because we don't have any of this that would naturally hide where that clump of hair actually goes. But it is important that we have this piece done because that means that we're about to be done with our front. So give it a subsurf. Make sure that it matches roughly the reference. It's going to be very, very close to the skin. Just winding over there. I have a feeling it ends about here. It gets tucked behind the ear. But I can't tuck it yet because I don't know what the hair around that part's going to look like. And then this is going to be surprisingly wide. About like this surprisingly wide. With a piece in the middle like that. Because most of it's going to be covered by the strand you can't see here, but the big side strand, this one. So it can afford to be a bit wide. And it needs to be a bit wide to cover up a lot of the skin of the head. So it's going to be still the same level of subsurf. I want to keep my hair about evenly subsurfed. Makes it much easier when you're texturing as well, because when the method I use for texturing and so on, I need to bake the base texture, and for baking, I want to have my solidify modifiers turned off or completely deleted. So it makes it easier having all of the hair be the same thickness. So give that our hair material. It has to come down a little bit further over here, to the point where I might even want to add another loop over there, because it runs really low. Now I don't want this poking through. Oh yeah, and this is why I hate mirroring things on the left. I'm actually going to apply our mirror, delete the left side, re-add our mirror, and now I can work on the right side again, because everything else I do is on the right side, so I'd rather these be on the right side as well. These have to be closer to the skin. Kind of like that. So I need to add another loop here. Like this. And now they shouldn't be poking through. So, yeah, that wouldn't be visible on this side anyway. So I guess these need to be like that. Smooth those a little bit. And these a little bit. Yeah, this one can't be mirrored either, unfortunately. Like, there's so little that can be mirrored here. The back, this here can be mirrored, thankfully. Except, no, it can't, because it flows along. Never mind. That's just where it starts. So yeah, it's really just going to be like this side piece that can be mirrored. Unfortunate. Okay, it does have hair already. So now we're at this point. Starting to look like something, now that it's not just the bald head either. So I don't really have anything where the ahoge is supposed to connect yet, apart from I know that it starts from about this clump. So, oh yeah, this is going to be hair side right, lower. So I'm going to add another plane. And this time we can't use snapping, because there's nothing up here to snap to. I guess we kind of, if I do it this way, we can kinda... Am I in edit mode? No, I'm not. No, I am. If I kinda snap it over here, delete that as well. We kind of have a starting spot now, so I can turn off snapping. And we know that it's going to start from here. So for this one, I'm going to have subsurf from the get-go. And just one-dimensionally tracey at the moment. Or well, rather two-dimensionally, but still. And that's our ahoge prototype, basically. I am going to... Because let's see, the curve is going to be... So that this tip is going to be curved like this. So this is about the curve that we're going to have, and a little bit of z-axis as well. like this. So now we're going to make sure, again, that after our rotation, we still kind of match the reference. Yep, that's good. This needs to be more curved. So does this. And this. And this needs to be more like this, I want to say. I think, maybe. I might have just undone everything. But that's at least got some curve. So I'm going to give it a solidify. Same thickness as the rest. Give it a middle bit. And it was convex this way. That's a little bit too thick. I don't want it to be that thick. Give it a 0.2 maybe. And this needs to be smaller. Still not curved enough for my liking, so I'm just gonna artificially curve it like this. Or maybe not like that, but rather like... Oh, we should have a side... Yeah, we do have a side reference. I'm curving it the exact wrong way. Oh, this is terrible. Okay. So like this, and then like this, and then more like this. Okay, not going to give that too much thought, other than I need to unmangle this. That's the wrong direction. Give it a smooth as well while we're here. And this is supposed to be pointing back down. There's no way, zero chance, this matches front and back. Especially considering the starting point is completely different as well, but... Except maybe it does. Maybe this is actually a really good character artist. Like, I've started complaining about several things about this reference sheet already. And turns out that, no, it's been completely fine. I've been complaining for nothing. Still needs more curvature. I'm gonna add it like this. So how did that happen? Okay, whatever. I decide how it goes now. So it curves like this. And then to counteract that, this part curves like this. And this goes more to the front. We give that a little bit of Z rotation. And I'm going to give it a smooth 2 and 2. Enable that. Curve even further. Even further over here. And here. Fatten that a little bit. Slide that up. Rotate. And then this here is supposed to, like, curve really hard. Actually put a dent into it. Okay, that's good. It doesn't exactly match the front, but this is one of those things where... And it definitely does not match the back. That or the side rather, but that doesn't matter. I'm taking my creative liberties right here. The important thing is that it looks like an ahoge. So I'm gonna give it the hair material. And yeah, it looks fine. It'll look better when there's like an actual piece of hair that it's coming out of. Some of this hair could still be a little bit further up, have more curve, especially from this side. I think I'm going to fix this a little bit. Add another loop here as well. Yeah, I kind of like that. And then this should match that by doing this. And then also this. And be closer to the skull in general. And I want this pulling back even further to accentuate the curvature of the hair. I'm going to ignore this piece, but it does look a lot better than it did look when it was just this singular clump. Having all the other pieces of hair around it are able to draw the attention away from it, so that's good. I want to smooth it at some point, but no, right now it needs to be thick to cover up this area. More like that. And then this curbs a little bit unnaturally. I don't want to smooth that though. I'd rather just do that and then bring this back instead. And you can see the little bit of... Okay, you should be able to see a little bit more of the eyebrows poking through here. Yeah, there should be much more of a gap here. And then fix that. And then if I render that, it's going to look nice. This still looks weird, but... Oh, it did. Yeah, my key capture did break. That's happened at least twice already this stream, so... Sometimes I wonder if there's a hotkey for it. Shift-Alt-C. I don't know when I ever would have pressed that, but Shift-Alt-C. But yeah, Shakes was in here earlier saying that, yeah, he's had that happen several times as well, where it just stops displaying for no reason. So, whatever, cool. Good software you got there. This needs to be in front of this hairpiece. And this needs to be on top of it. And yeah, this is going to look weird until we have this piece here, basically blocking it entirely. So I'm going to call... What did we make this? This is going to be hair ahoge. I'm going to save. All that hair progress. Actually, hold up, can you... Yeah, you can see that, okay. I've got my OBS on my other monitor, and it was just a grey screen, so I thought you can actually see any of my Blender dialogues. So just kind of looking for any obvious issues that we would still want to address here before ending the session. But I can't see any. And again, this is what I mean with the... It's more obvious now that we have the eyes actually made and they've got material and so on. This is what I mean with the, like, convex space for the eye sockets. The eyes kind of follow you around. It's not as pronounced as it could be, but it's still a nice effect, and you wouldn't get that if you made some more shallow eye sockets, which completely fine, but I just like this effect. But yeah, I honestly think that's about a decent spot to end for the first session. And I think tomorrow, same time. I'm 99% sure tomorrow, same time. I'm just going to continue working on the hair. And it might genuinely be the entire thing might just be about the hair. But hopefully we should be able to finish the hair tomorrow. And then from there on, we can move to some more actually exciting stuff like, well, the body and clothes. I don't think I'm going to be making this weird thing. Like, that would be added time to the entire thing, and by the time we're done here, everyone should have kind of the basic idea of how to approach something like this. Yeah, just trying to think if there's anything else. I don't think there is anything else. So yeah, tomorrow, same time. Should be about the same runtime as well. I was aiming for 4 hours, and we made it to, what, 3 hours and 20, so that's good. And this is a very nice spot to end it on, because if I moved on to working on these side pieces, it would be another 2 hours